Go ahead, Sandy.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Move to Amend Ohio's somewhat deep dive into issue 1. For those of you who are new to Move to Amend, and we Move to Amenders, we are a nonpartisan people's movement seeking genuine democracy for all. To this end, we are the proud sponsors of the We the People Amendment. When ratified, the We the People Amendment will overturn corrupt Supreme Court rulings that have ceded personhood rights to corporations. In fact, if they had not done this in the past, corporations would not be so powerful as they are today, and we would not be dealing with something like issue 1. The We the People Amendment, just to encapsulate it, would abolish the notion that corporations are people and money is speech. And this would, of course, put people in the helm of our democracy, because right now, corporations using their personhood rights are taking over a lot of our public areas. So we will be happy to, anybody on the panel, be happy to address any questions, the more specific questions you have about Move to Amend. But for now, let's get into the thick of issue 1, which in fact is all on its own, embodies the reasons why we need the We the People Amendment. You could use this alone and you'll see why we need the We the People Amendment. So what is issue 1? In short, it is a bill proposed by our highly gerrymandered state house to gut our constitutional rights to citizen initiatives. And what is a citizen initiative? In our state, it is a super rigorous but still fair process by which Ohioans may put legislation that we want on the ballot when our elected officials have failed to do so themselves. Now, for 111 years, Ohioans have had this option and it has worked. If you take, in the last decade, we've had at least 2 anti-gerrymandering initiatives that passed overwhelmingly. And of course, the corrupt bill that led to the, that exposed the corruption in our state by Householder and others, we voted that down. So it works. But issue 1 is also threatens our citizen initiative rights, or issue 1, that's what it does. It threatens our citizen initiative rights. If passed, it would amend the current process to make it virtually impossible for we the people to get our bills on the ballots. And if by chance, some small miracle, we do get it on the ballot, it makes it virtually impossible for them to pass. Our next speaker, Deb Hogshead, will lay out these specific changes and explain why. But before she does that, I would like to address the overall contradictory nature of issue 1. And I have 5 of them. Contradiction 1, its backers say that amending the Ohio Constitution, this is a constitutional issue, should require a higher bar than passing other legislation, in other words, the ones they propose. According to them, this includes increasing the simple 50% plus 1 majority required to pass bills to 60% plus 1. Obviously, this would allow the minority to block popular legislation. In fact, that is what the 60% juggernaut is meant to do. These people are not looking out for our best interest. Contradiction 2, its backers say that issue 1 would ward off out-of-state interference. Yet this bill is largely financed by out-of-state money. Its main donor is Dick Uihlein, who I had not known of before. He keeps under the radar, he tries to, but he's a billionaire from Illinois who is funneling millions into the Yes campaign. Grossly ironic is the name of his super PAC. Anybody know it? You're not going to believe this one. It's called Save Our Constitution. Yeah, the one that's is trying to destroy it. The third contradiction I'd like to share is that proponents of issue 1 argue that too many citizen initiatives are popping up these days. And this one is true. Yet this surge only proves why Ohioans need direct democracy. Seriously, if our reps are tired of dealing with citizen initiatives, then why don't they propose bills that their constituents want, such as you probably could list a million yourself. I've got about 500,000 here. Fair maps to end gerrymandering, affordable health care, good schools, environmental protections, police accountability, and of course the We the People Amendment, among others. But the backers of issue 1 do not seem to be too concerned with our interests. In fact, many are often on the other side working against our interests, and that's precisely what issue 1, if passed, would be doing. The fourth contradiction that I'd like to share is this idea of holding the election in August. Now listen, just last year, the state assembly's majority members ruled against having special elections, claiming that they cost the state millions for elections that attracted fewer than 10% of Ohio's voters. Then suddenly, for issue 1, they reversed the reversal to make way for an August 8 election. What gives? Well, I think it's pretty clear to everyone. Knowing how unpopular issue 1 is, they calculated that their best hope for a yes vote victory lies in fast tracking this election in August. How so? It allows for just a very short window for the no vote campaigns, which are typically underfunded grassroots groups, to reach out to most Ohioans. And also, August elections typically equal low voter turnout. After all, students are away for the summer, families away for on vacation, and many Ohioans are unaware that there is even an August election taking place. This allows the far wealthier yes vote to galvanize their core groups, their core voters, get them out there, and have less competition from the rest of us. And the last contradiction is actually the one that's most personally mind-blowing to me. And it is how the gerrymandered majority have characterized issue 1 as necessary for good and democratic government. All the evidence showcases the opposite. Just how how undemocratically the forerunner bills of issue 1 were passed in committee is a perfect example. For instance, on April 19th, I was there, and I believe I see some other names of people who were there on April 19th, just a few months ago, to testify against HJR 1. There was also this one in the Senate, but HJR 1 eventually morphed into issue 1. And the testimonies submitted in advance had proponent testimonies and opponent testimonies. Anyone want to guess how many, or does anyone know how many proponents, how many people were speaking out for issue 1, or for this bill? It was 8.
Oh.
8, sorry, 8 people. And I looked at the names, lots of, people working for groups with some money. The opponents, get this, hold on to your seats, 182. Now that's how many submitted testimonies, 182. And this included approximately 100 people who had shown up in person from all corners of the state to testify. I live a 20-minute bus ride from the State House. I went there, but we all know that you and other people are coming from far greater distances. And yet the chair would not hear, in our hearing, that's for the people, the chair would not hear more than a few of us. In fact, at the beginning of the session, he announced a 3-hour cutoff, and then said he would hold the vote. And by the way, this is Chairman Phil Plummer. So 8 versus 182. It's hard to figure out who's going to win on this. But the opponents of 8 won over the opponents of 182. Now, normally there are more hearings when there's a lot of people, but not this time. Clearly, the plan was to quickly send these bills to the General Assembly, where in this gerrymandered arena, they knew it would pass. The hypocrisy is mind-boggling until you realize that issue 1 is part of a wider national plan to gut direct democracy by the people. Why? By stifling the voices of the people It makes it easier for those with big money to get their legislation passed. So what is issue 1? A big money attempt to doom popular citizen initiatives, which, on the flip side, is a way to assure passage of legislation that runs counter to our best interest. This is why we need the We the People Amendment. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Deb Hogshead, who's going to dive in more specifically to what issue 1 is trying to change, trying to amend. So Deb, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides I want to share. Okay, so why is it not giving me the option?
I made you co-host.
Yeah, okay, so
The very bottom should be share screen,
share screen.
little icon.
This is where I should always practice. It's okay. I'm sorry. I'm looking at share screen. I've
Click on it, double click.
clicked on it and I get 3 options: advanced sharing options. Multiple participants can share, 1 participant at a time. But it's not letting me, it's not taking me to my screen.
Try it now.
Okay, my bad. Here we go.
Yay.
Okay, so I'm going to, okay, now it's not, okay. Play from start. Okay, I want to begin by reminding folks that there are 3 ways to amend the Constitution. And I'm not talking about things to referendums or initiatives related to legislation, but to amendments. So there are 3 ways to propose an amendment to the Ohio Constitution. Constitutional Convention, a process which hasn't been used since around 1910, joint resolution of the General Assembly, and initiative, petition, or what we call citizen initiative. And of course, it's the citizen initiative that's the primary target of state issue 1. And as Sandy mentioned, it's the General Assembly that's doing the targeting by proposing 3 changes. So let's take a look at these 3 changes. 2 of the changes affect the citizen initiative process directly. And first up here in this slide is the number of counties from which signatures are required for placing a citizen initiative on the ballot. It would no longer be enough to get signatures from 44 counties. Signatures would need to be obtained from all 88 counties. Failure to get the required number of signatures in just 1 county would doom the effort. Opponents could block an initiative just by focusing their resources on just 1 county. Currently, the citizen initiative process has a cure period. That means if it's determined the submitted petitions do not have the required number of valid signatures, petitioners have 10 additional days to make up the difference. If issue 1 is passed, the cure period is eliminated. The 3rd change applies to all amendments that make their way to the ballot, whether proposed by citizen initiative, the General Assembly, or the exceedingly rare Constitutional Convention. Currently, voters can pass any amendment on the ballot with a simple majority. If issue 1 is passed, the passing rate changes to a super majority. Here's the certified ballot language. And when I first read it, my heart dropped. People unaware of what's at stake will likely see this proposed amendment as reasonable and vote yes. Notice the word eliminating in the title. It's a biased word suggesting the proposed changes are better than the current requirements. But of course, you can also see that the ballot language provides no context. It fails to show voters what the current requirements are. And as I mentioned earlier, the proposed change in passage rate applies to all amendments, not just citizen initiatives. Supporters of state one, as Sandy mentioned, say the citizen initiative process and amendment passage rate has to be changed to protect Ohio's Constitution from deep-pocketed outside special interest groups. Well, when you take a look at proposed amendments that have made it to the ballot over the past 100 plus years, you can see just how unnecessary the proposed changes are. And I do want to say, please be aware, I got my information from the Secretary of State's website, and I did my own calculations. So my numbers may be a bit different from what you've seen or heard. However, the pattern will be the same. Of the 227 proposed constitutional amendments, not other issues or referendums, of the 227 proposed constitutional amendments that made it to statewide ballot between 1913 and 2022, you can see that just under 1/3 came from citizen initiatives. Most, or about 2/3, came from the General Assembly. Voters passed only 19, or 27%, of the amendments proposed through citizen initiatives. By contrast, voters passed 108, or 69%, of the amendments from the General Assembly. Now, of the 127 proposed amendments that passed between 1913 and 2022, 50 of them passed with less than a supermajority of 60%. And most of those had been placed on the ballot by the General Assembly. My next slide provides a sampling of amendments that would not have passed if the passing rate had been 60%. I'm going to let you just glance through that just to highlight a few. If a 60% passing rate had been required in earlier years, we would not have removed racist, sexist, and unconstitutional language from Ohio's Constitution in 1923, 1953, and 1976. The state would not have been authorized to issue bonds to cover the cost of environmental conservation projects in 2000. And the minimum wage would not have been raised in 2006. And it looks to me that Ohio's Constitution doesn't need any more protections, at least not the kind the General Assembly is proposing. As the chant goes, state issue one is unfair, undemocratic, and it's unnecessary. And that's it for me. Greg, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, very compelling testimony and presentations by both Sandy and Deb. Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for participating. My comments are actually very brief. You've heard it. The only item I want to say before sort of moving to what you can do beyond what you may have already been doing is simply, as the title of this whole program and effort tried to convey, this is in part about corporate rule and trying to rein in corporate rule, which, as we know, is hard enough as it is in having the tools that we have, as incomplete and as few as they are. Citizen initiative is one of the remaining direct democratic tools that we have. We don't have to go through surrogates, right, or representatives, depending on what you want to call them. And we don't have to go through them. We can do an end run around public officials by either creating law, that's a initiative, undoing law, that's a referendum, or kicking them out. That's when you can repeal and actually remove people from office. That's what the 1912 Constitutional Convention permitted. This would dramatically, as has been presented by Deb and by Sandy, would imply. What that means is, when it comes to trying to rein in corporate rule, a couple of things. As you may know, there's more than 700 communities around the country at the local level that have passed ballot initiatives or municipal resolutions calling for the We the People Amendment to abolish corporate constitutional rights and money as free speech. But there's also been 8 states, and those states have, a couple of them have been done by ballot initiative: California, Washington, Montana, 1 or 2 others. That would not have been possible, even though this wins, and it wins big at a municipal level and does very well at the state level, where these states have gotten these measures on the ballot. They haven't garnered 60%. So it would be impossible if we in Ohio at some point in the future would want to try to place an initiative calling on Congress and trying to create at the state level what many of you have done at the local level, which has been to not only pass the We the People Amendment calling on Congress, but creating a what we call Democracy Day public hearing that mandates the municipality to hold a public hearing where citizens can show up and testify as to the impact of money in politics and corporate rule on their lives, their neighborhoods, their communities, and such. As you know, this has been a way to amplify this issue, to go beyond merely the effort to get it passed on the ballot. It keeps it alive every year, every other year. That would be impossible to do. Moreover, where we are seeing corporate malfeasance occurring individually, right now there is in many states something that permits individuals, mostly through surrogates here again, to revoke corporate charters. We're in fact trying to call for that through Attorney General David Yost. Some of you may have gotten recently a email or 2 calling for your response and your invitation to sign a petition, calling in fact for Attorney General Yost to initiate charter revocation proceedings. That is currently embedded in the state revised code. But in some states, charter revocation is in state constitutions. And that is something that could occur to make it, much harder to change, because we know, right? Something that's in the state law can be there today and can be gone tomorrow if there is an effort to do just that. And just to sort of say and give a little anecdote, is it's probably been 20 years now, where, geez, maybe 30 years, where when I was still working for the American Friends Service Committee, I got wind that the Corporations Committee of the National Bar Association was sort of making the rounds around the country. Remember those days when guys or individuals would go around door to door selling encyclopedias or sweepers or whatever else, sort of making the rounds? That's what the Bar Association, the corporate committee, was doing, making the rounds, going state to state, trying to weaken the existing corporate code of that state, which is embedded in the revised code, the laws. And what they would do is they would play off one state against another. They would say to the state legislature in one state, well, the state next door or the state above you or the state below you just sort of made the law more business friendly. You do want to keep up with the joke. You want to keep up with your neighbors, don't you? Using the same line that the encyclopedia salesman and all the other people going door to door would sell. Same argument was being made by the corporate attorneys connected to the American Bar Association. And so they pretty much got away with it. They would go around, and it happened about every generation, where they would go around and sort of what they would call modernize, quote unquote, the state corporate code, which was euphemism for weaken and make it more difficult for we the people to sort of try to use the state code to, again, deal with corporate bad apples, deal with individual forms of malfeasance, to try to make corporate entities accountable. So laws that are here today can be, quote unquote, modernized, i.e. weakened in a flash. And certainly that happened 20 years ago. I showed up and people, who were there, corporate attorneys in the state, they know one another, they go out to lunch together and all. It's like, who the heck is this guy? And they, who are you? Well, I'm with American Friend. What's that? American Friends Service Committee. What are you here for? Well, I'm trying to protect the state corporate code. Oh, so, when you have a constitutional amendment, that's much harder to change once it's embedded. Well, that would not be possible if we tried to do that post the passage of issue 1. So those are just a couple of examples. There are many others that would make it much harder for we the people to do democracy directly via the initiative process. So all the more reason to do everything you can to make sure that this achieves its desirable and worthy defeat. So what is in the chat that I put is maybe what you saw in an earlier email or two that went out advertising this program. It's a quarter-page flyer, a half-page flyer, and for those of you who are into social media, the Facebook link on the Move to Amend Ohio page, that in all 3 instances, you can cut and paste and print out in the case of the first 2 flyers. They're very simple, short, small, little flyers that I've used when I've gone around and I was just working my precinct up here in Cleveland Heights, handing out information on issue 1 by any number of organizations. And while doing it from the Democratic Party and Common Cause, I handed out our flyer that Move to Amend put together that tries to specifically focus on the democratization or the anti-democratization of this bill. So for those of you who still may, even if you just go to your neighborhood and not couple it with any other information, print them out, cut them in fourths. If you have a paper cutter, do it. If not, just take a pair of scissors. Doesn't have to. What I find actually is the least professional it looks, the better, because it stands out over the more slick professional flyers that are out there. It's sort of more handmade, so it looks actually more legit and more, therefore, credible. So feel free to do that. That's what I've done, reached out to about 150 homes in my community. Feel free to do the same. Or if you're just into my TwitFace social media, take the link on the Facebook page and post that on your Facebook page. It's a link to the 4-page flyer, and invite people to do the same, to spread it out. Each one teach one, do what you can, where you can, when you can, between now and the special election on August 8th. So I guess at this point, open for any questions or comments. To ask something, for those of you who were responsible and muted, you'll have to unmute. And Sandy, you are muted.
There you go. Okay. I have a question, and that is how there's only a few of us on this thing, so I'm just wondering how much do the people on this call know about, how familiar do most of you feel you are with this bill? And what about people you've spoken to? When you mention this to people, are they saying, oh yeah, I know all about it, or they seem confused, or they've never heard about it? Or so I'm just really curious about any comments you may have on that.
I just got off a call from 6 to 7 where there were about 170 or 180 people on it, talking in detail about issue 1 in the Moore case and what the Ohio Supreme Court might do with the Moore case, and then that devolved into a discussion of issue 1. So they're a fairly good audience, and the pro-choice people I talked to are very, very interested in it. Look at the 2 as in effect linked bills.
Thank you. Deb, did you have?
Well, Carla had a raise her hand.
Carla?
I voted today. I voted no. I wanted to make sure I voted on the first day of early voting. So in case I die tomorrow, at least I voted no. Makes you one.
Were there other people there?
There were. I wouldn't say it was crowded. It was there this afternoon. It was busier than the other times that I've gone to the board to vote. The other thing that I've noticed is that I see a heck of a lot of no on issue 1 signs. I have yet to see a yes on issue 1 sign. Although one individual I know told me that he had seen one on the back of a truck of a mega person. Vote yes on issue 1. But what I found is that people who are politically aware at all are quite aware of issue 1, and people who are not aren't. And so that's been my experience.
Mhm. Thanks, Carla. Deb,
Yeah.
did you have? Deb?
I'll respond to your question, Sandy. When I've been out in public with my sign and my petition and stuff, people come up to me who do not know anything about it. I'd say maybe half of the people have not known anything and were interested. The other half who saw me and I asked about a special election, they just pretty much ignored me. The Dayton Daily News in the paper today mentioned that here in the Dayton metro area, voter turnout is very high compared to the August election last year. And the Board of Elections in the area counties are thinking that, are estimating that they expect a turnout of 15 to 30%, although they admit they really can't tell. But the numbers on the first day suggest that there's interest. And then I have a question when after nobody else has any other questions.
Did anybody else want to voice what you know about this or your thoughts on it? Okay, Deb, I think you can go ahead again.
Greg, Sandy, I really want to get out in front of the post office and go up to concerts on the square here in Troy. And the other day I was ready to go up to the post office, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to spend my time doing that today. Miami County is extremely red. And I was thinking, what if I go up there and actually help promote the yes cause by letting all the people who would be likely to vote yes, who might not be aware, now they're suddenly aware, and now more are going to come out and vote yes, because there are a lot of yes signs in our area. And so I sort of wonder, if I'm out there, will I just help the yes side, since people up here are going to see that as a very liberal, see no as being a very liberal stance.
Well, the strategy I'm using is what is the truth. Many people are thinking that it's about that this issue 1 will determine abortion one way or the other. And in some ways, yes, but really it's so much more than that. I mean, there's going to be hopefully an election in November, a ballot initiative in November about specifically abortion. But right now, this is about preserving our rights to citizen initiative. And what scares me is that people who think I'm going to vote yes because I'm anti-abortion, I'm going to save those little children, those fetuses. I'm afraid that they don't understand the full context of it, because I don't think they would be happy to know that they are also jeopardizing gerrymandering activities or minimum wage or a whole anything that the people want. So that's the strategy I'm using, is saying, again, it's not strategy, it's just perfect truth. This is the real vote right now, is about, are we going to continue to have citizen initiatives?
Thanks, that's helpful.
How I would phrase it is maybe slightly different. I would ask a question to whomever it is, particularly our friends on the other side of the ideological spectrum, which would simply be, do you feel that you should have the power and the authority to hold elected officials accountable? Yes or no? I think there is so much, whoever you are, distrust for different reasons. some more legitimate than others, of public officials and how they've been captured. Let's use that to the extent that that's legitimate. And there's a lot of legitimacy to it. But even the illegitimate, what is that? It's sort of like political jujitsu. You use this against them. And it's true too. You hold them accountable, because without the citizen initiative and the referendum, how are decisions that they make in passing laws going to be reversed? They won't, they can't, it's impossible. So I would just simply ask that single question.
Thanks, Greg. That's real helpful too. So you said how would you, do you feel you should have the power to hold officials accountable? You had another word in there, power and right.
Authority. Authority, power, authority.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you.
Or maybe freedom. Because you lose that freedom. You lose that direct power to hold public officials accountable without hey, I mean, look, the citizen initiative has been certainly hijacked by big money that comes in. But that's because, in part, we know why, right? Big money is corrupting and poisoning and destroying everything it gets its hand on politically. So citizen initiative is no different, but it is something that can be done for good, and this is one way to hold them accountable.
Any other comments? Because I actually got a lot out of the comments that were made so far. For instance, I will be heading to the Board of Elections in Columbus and have those cards. And by the way, if you're in Columbus, I have some of those cards already printed out, and you're welcome to have them or come with me when I go, or whatever you want to do. But I'm going to head to the Board of Elections as much as I can over these election days, over this early voting period, and of course, during election day. But I have been saying it whenever I went to a swimming thing and I'm at the store, I mention it. I'm not shy about any of my political concerns. I'm always talking about Move to Amend wherever I am, giving my little card. And right now I'm giving, I'm talking about this issue 1, and so many people maybe have heard of it, but don't know about it. But there's also a good many who do. And I just keep telling them, make sure you vote and tell your friends. I'm actually impressed by how many people are aware of this issue, issue 1. But then I'm here in the thick of campus, so I'd really like to hear from others what your experiences have been, if you know of other people who, what they're saying. Well, that is, I think if no one has anything else to contribute, does anybody have any more questions? Or may I see a show of hands? How many of you feel like you have an understanding? Many of you, I recognize a lot of you. How many felt you had a good understanding of this in the first place? Terrific. Actually, good on you, because I thought I did too. And then when I was preparing for this talk, I learned a lot. And then Deb, your statistics were just fabulous. So, you're above me on that, because I really did. For me, the contradictions are just so obvious, and why we let people get away with that, I can't figure out, except people think it's too hard, we can't change it. And if with this amendment, if there's a yes vote on this, they might be right.
I think they've overreached. At some point, people who have power and keep amassing power, it's greed. There's economic greed and there's political greed. And they have, I think, reached the point, it's a tipping point. I think they have gone overboard, and it's going to come back and bite them.
I'd like to ask if it would be possible. I was taking notes and taking pictures of the screen, on the presentation and stuff, but it'd be possible to gets the contradictions material that you presented, because I'm not sure my notes covered everything, and it would just be nice to hear it the way you presented it as a way of speaking to people about that stuff.
Are you okay with the recording?
With the recording,
Do you want a recording of this session, or did you want it printed notes?
printed notes, if
Sure, I can send it
that's
to you.
possible.
Yeah, if,
Do you have those,
Greg-
do you have those written up?
yeah,
Sandy?
I
Just
could,
send them to me and I'll send them out to people.
okay, I will do
And
that.
Deb, same with if you have your PowerPoints or slides, if you can send those to me, I'll include it as well.
Very good, very good.
And Greg, if you can give it a few days before you send it out, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm trying to put together this little video, trying to make it short as can be, but about issue 1, because I think a lot of people are more likely to turn on a little quick video about something they want to know about. So if you wait a day or 2, I can send it to you, that little video, and then you can send it along too. Or,
Okay, can you do it by Friday?
oh yeah, easily, yeah.
Great. Okay, it'll go out Friday.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Carla?
Just saying good night. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. And I'm so glad people were on the other call, beforehand. And I will get their recording for that because they always cover so much material. So I guess everybody's going to those Wednesday roundtables that they have once a month. If you're not, ask around and we can give you that information too. Okay,
Great. Be well all.
thank you, everybody.
Get the word out, propagandize.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Good night.